This is where we kind of start out every year, and Jason, I'll let you kind of take over here. We had a report here the other day, and a little bit less of corn and beans. So we carry those numbers in, and how does that play out when we look at that?
Yeah, the way we normally set up our tables, if you guys come to our meetings, what we're looking at here is forecasting forward for next year's acres. So if you take the middle number, 90 million planted corn acres, and then forecast a little bit higher planted corn acres at 92, a little bit less at 88, and you start to see and filter down through there on your supply and demand tables where we come in. And, you know, again, you know, something we like to talk about, you know, going forward, the glass is half full. When you look at the bottom line on your ending stocks, it really doesn't take much of a reduction in acres to come back in line with some more supportive ending stocks numbers. So, but yeah, going forward on the final crop report from last year, they did reduce the yield and harvested acres a little bit. So that brings your ending or your beginning stocks number down to 2.355, down from 2.4 from where we were. So the crop is shrinking up just a little bit. But then again, you know, you get down here, you know, with trendline yields. If you start thinking 90 million acres or less, you know, it doesn't take much to really kind of shore up our supply picture.
When you look at this, we used a 170.8 yield. That's kind of a trend line type yield. And you go down to the bottom line, stocks to use ratio is something that's important. So at 88 million acres, you got to carry out a 1.6 at the bottom there, stocks to use ratio 11.3. That kind of number there really makes the market more sensitive to and price increases if you're going to be down at that level. When you look at the middle column at 170.8, you still get a smaller carryout at 1.97 billion bushel. So stocks to use ratio again is a number that would say increasing prices. On the far right, even interesting there, using a 170.8 yield, you still have less corn next year at 2.2 billion than you do today. So there's your encouragement for corn. What we're going to flip over to on the next slide here is to show you what would happen if we reduce the yield. Far left column on a low yield, 165, you go down to the bottom line, you're at 1.4 billion. That's not really a failure, that's just a smaller crop than what we've been doing. Middle column at 170, you're at 1.9. And on the far right, if we hit another home run, so to speak, and we end up at 174.5, carryout's 2.3, pretty similar to where we are today. So just to give you some perspectives on where and why the corn market is giving us a little more optimistic view. When we look ahead, the other reason is, we'll talk about a bit, is, well, why are we going to have less corn acres, Jason, and where are the people who are going to do that? Where are they coming from?
Well, with current prices right now, you've got a lot of fringe acres looking at a lot of different things, and I'll use a friend of mine as an example. Graduated college with a friend that now works for Dow AgroSciences, and he manages their cotton program down south. And he mentioned to me the other day when we were having lunch that there is a big time switch coming down in the southeast and the south, and potentially over into Texas and Arkansas. Switching away from corn acres and going with cotton or potentially even some more soybeans. Soybean price would forecast that kind of a switch. The cotton price also does the same. And both of those products also get you a crop that's going to use less fertilizer, less inputs, and a lot less water than, say, corn would. And if you look at a drought monitor, the southeast and the south are still, you know, suffering somewhat from really dry conditions. So those are just a couple of the things we're looking at. Yeah, South Dakota, North Dakota, kind of the same situation, you know, looking to switch away from something that's so, you know, such a high cost crop like corn, looking for something cheaper right now like soybeans, or even maybe back to some wheat eventually.
We also work closely with Interstate Commodities, so we have a conference call. One of the thoughts that came up the other day from one of the traders in New York, he goes, well, you guys always talk about you're going to plant less corn acres. And the point of that is, what I told him back was, well, 90 million is still a lot of corn acres. If you go back in time, we used to plant 85 million, 87 million, 83 million. So 90 million is still a big number. It's not like we're really completely going away from corn, it's just smaller. And I think that's the point of all these markets. For the last several years, all we've heard about is huge crops, how big the carryout it is. but we don't talk a lot about the demand side of the equation, which with cheap prices, we've really stimulated the demand. And when we talk about soybeans, we'll talk about how the USDA has continuously not anticipated or shown how much really demand we have.